Moments ago, President Trump touched down in Qatar, the country that, yes, is offering to give the President of the United States a $400 million plane, Trump says, as a gift that he's looking to use as Air Force One. He is in Doha now. It is the second stop on his 4-day sweep through the Middle East. On the flight over from Saudi Arabia, the president spoke with reporters. We played some of that for you last hour. He also, during the chat with reporters on the plane, he talked about the possibility of traveling to Turkey for a potential and could be important high-stakes meeting, potentially between Ukraine's president and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Here's what the president said.
He would like me to be there, and that's a possibility. If we could end the war, I'd be thinking about it. So we have a very full situation. Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't do it to save a lot of lives and come back. But, yeah, I think they're thinking about something. I don't know that he would be there if I'm not there.
And that does seem to be some of the latest reporting. Unclear who could be going over to Turkey on the part of Russia. So stand by for more news on that. Before he left Saudi Arabia, there was a historic meeting that the president took part in. Trump coming face to face and shaking hands with the new president of Syria after President Trump made the announcement that he will be lifting sanctions, long-held sanctions on that country. A decision that was applauded in the room, a decision that inspired celebration in the streets of Damascus, firing off fireworks even on the news. CNN's Elena Treen joins us now with much more on this. What else did you hear from the president on the flight over, Elena?
Well, I think the two main things are really what the president said, of course, about the meeting potentially in Turkey with President Putin potentially being there, and of course, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said he would. But then also, I think this news with Syria is just pretty remarkable. First of all, the meeting between President Donald Trump and Syria's new president is the highest level meeting they've had since the Assad regime was toppled at the end of last year. And the fact that the president yesterday met with Syria's new president and said that they would be lifting sanctions. I mean, this is a huge deal for Syria, of course, which has really been struggling for years now due to the economic strain from the United States and others that they have placed on their government. So as you mentioned, they've been celebrating that news. But I also found it very interesting what the president said on Air Force One when describing his viewpoint of how that meeting went with Syria's president. He essentially said that he was a great, young, attractive, tough guy. He said he has a strong past. I would note that Syria's president al-Shara had previously been part of a militant group referred to in English as the Victory Front, which had pledged allegiance in the past to al-Qaeda. But in 2016, he shifted gears and kind of backed away from the terror group. But just to have the president using that type of rhetoric and language to describe him, it's pretty remarkable. But look, one of the things that the president also said about Syria is that he would like them to eventually join the Abraham Accords, of course, something that they worked on during the first Trump administration to normalize diplomatic relationships between Arab nations and Israel. If Syria were actually to join that would be really, striking, a huge development. And to see that the president is really pushing on this, we heard him say similar things about wanting Saudi Arabia to join those accords yesterday. It's very clear that he's really trying to strengthen the U.S. relationship with these Middle East partners. But Syria, of course, a very big change from what we've had in the past.
Elena Treen, thank you so much. Much more to come from the president's visit in Qatar today. John.
All right, with us now, David Sanger, CNN political and national security analyst. David, great to see you. Kate and Elena were talking about the president's comments on maybe going to Turkey to get involved in the negotiations over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You've got a fascinating piece in the New York Times, which says that U.S. allies and adversaries, to an extent, are getting wise on President Trump's negotiating style. What do you mean?
Well, what we've seen, John, is that the president goes and makes a maximalist demand. Think about the tariff demands. Then he gets involved in a negotiation because of the crisis it's created. And some other adversaries and allies have come to the conclusion that he will back down. The question is, how do you manage him to go do that? Well, the Chinese decided to ignore the president's advice, which was don't try to match these tariffs. They matched them. They waited for about 5 weeks as the economic impact on that sort of settled in on the US, the stock markets, the prospect of inflation or empty shelves at Walmart. And then they came and basically won a major reduction down to 30%, a 90-day negotiating period, and they gave up almost nothing in return.
What does Vladimir Putin see in this? As again, we are talking about these talks, which will happen to some extent in Turkey.
Right. And, I think here for the president, the key question is, when does he intervene? Usually you bring a president in as a closer, and I'm sure he would want to get involved chiefly if Putin shows up in Turkey. And Putin has not yet said whether he will do so, but this would be a way for the two to meet. Putin recognizes that the relationship between the president and President Zelensky of Ukraine has been a pretty terrible one. And the result is that I think he believes he can peel the president away, because the president's real goal here is a normalized relationship with Russia. But to do that, he needs some agreement over Ukraine. I don't think he cares that much about the details of it. And that's what worries Zelensky, which is that the president may say, well, give up the land. You don't need security guarantees. Our economic engagement with you will be enough of a security guarantee that Putin won't continue through the rest of Ukraine. I'm not sure that's right.
David, again, on this trip, there's been some really fascinating language used in negotiations that are involving the U.S. and Iran. What do you see here, and what does, again, Iran see in the president's negotiating style?
So the Iranians are beginning to float, at least publicly, John, an idea for the nuclear program that we hadn't really heard before. We've gotten bits and pieces, which is, let's do an energy joint venture. The United States, maybe Saudi Arabia, will become part of this joint venture, and we'll all work on nuclear and energy issues together. Now, of course, what the Iranians want to do is avoid having to take apart, to dismantle the incredibly large infrastructure they have built that would enable them to have a pathway to a bomb. And the U.S. position has been they've got to give it all up. And I think what the Iranians are trying to do is play to President Trump's desire to have investments, have access to Iranian oil and so forth, as a way of keeping that infrastructure. And the question is going to be, how big a risk do you want to take? And could you get the Israelis to go along? Or would the Israelis say dismantlement means dismantlement?
Yeah, language the likes of which we have not heard. And the Iranians may be playing to President Trump's desire to make not just deals, but financial deals. We'll see where this goes next. David Sanger, great to see you again. The article was fantastic.